Hello, thanks for joining in this week. So we've been talking about forms in classical music. Last week we looked at rondo and we looked at Mozart. So we're talking about music from the classical era. So today we're going to look at theme and variation. And the essential question that I have for you is, was Haydn a musical troll? So first, let's take a look in our Canvas course. Here we've got a nice painting, and there's the credit for the photo there, of Haydn leading a string quartet. Haydn is widely considered to be the father of both the string quartet and the symphony, so he's a very, very important composer to us as string players. So let's read through this real quick. Now that we've learned about theme and variations form, we're going to take a look at a wonderful example of an exemplary performance. We will take a look at the structure of Joseph Haydn's Symphony No. 94, Movement 2, which is often referred to as the Surprise Symphony. The theme is in two parts. Each part is 8 measures long and then repeats itself. So you have 16 measures or 2 phrases of the first part, followed by 16 measures, again 2 phrases of the second part. That will be the theme. He introduces a variation of the same extended theme each time he finishes it. So we're going to pause at each variation and talk about what we expect to hear. See, as you listen to this, see if you can figure this out. See if you can identify the theme inside the variations. Some of them are pretty obvious and some of them are a little bit more subtle. So question primers for your short answer at the end of this page in Canvas. Haydn uses rhythm, texture, which is instrument combinations, dynamics, or chord changes to create variations of this theme. Did he use these techniques one at a time or in combinations? Okay, so how does he use these things to create his variation? Next, primer. Which variation was your favorite? Or maybe it's a combination of two in the way he transitions between one variation and another. And why was that your favorite? Next, primer. In the first variation, we get an unexpected surprise. Did the reaction of the performers make it more fun? I think what we're getting there is a little glimpse into Haydn's snarky personality. That's why I'm wearing the hat today, is to celebrate Haydn's personality. Because while he was a great and serious composer, he had a little bit of a dark sense of humor, and he was well known for being a prankster. His music was full of jokes that were intended to either shock or catch the audience by surprise. He was known to do things in his music to try and trick people into applauding at the wrong time. Kind of a cool guy. In the first variation, from the surprises, especially at the end, do you feel you get a sense of Haydn's personality and his sense of humor? And the last primer from his musical jokes, would you consider him to have been a musical troll? So that's our essential question this week is, was Haydn a musical troll? All right, so a couple other things before we start listening. The music of the classical period, and here you can see an orchestra arranged in classical seating. There's a couple of versions of seating for the classical orchestra. I'm right there. I picked that photo because it's a very good example of what it might have looked like. So one thing we really want to pay attention to is in the classical era, music is full of contrast. Dynamics get louder and softer, both abruptly and gradually. So it's all about contrast and mood. They were often during this period, the composer was also the first violin and they played along in the orchestra. But later on, it also became popular to have a conductor. Prior to this point, you didn't really have conductors leading groups. Okay. So this is also in Canvas, so you can go through this and read that page when you work through that page. One more thing before we start listening. let's drag over our chart. So this is one version of what a classical period orchestra seating looks like. In our video, I want you to notice it's not exactly the same as this. This image is in Canvas 2, so you can see it. The basses are going to be tucked way back in a corner of the stage. The cellos and the violas are kind of bunched up right here. And these wind instruments are pushed to the back. The timpani will be up here. So pay attention. There's a little bit of variance, but this is the general idea of what they're going to look like. Now, if you want to pause the video and either get a piece of paper and create your own Cornell notes or print the Cornell note page out from the link in Canvas, go ahead and do so. And once you have unpaused, so here's our header, theme and variation, Haydn Symphony number 4, movement 2, surprise. Form, so we have A. A will be our main theme. So our first section is A, and I've gone ahead and written the notes here. So the theme equals 2 times 8 measure phrases, each repeated. Haydn signals the end with a timpani / orchestral hit. And you'll know what I mean by an orchestra hit when you hear it. It's pretty obvious. Is he setting us up for the surprise? Equals joke equals troll. So why are the wind players sleeping? So if you watch the wind players during this first section, they appear to be sleeping until something happens. So here we go. Let's get it started. Look at all the wind players sleeping away. And they're all like, what happened? I wasn't sleeping. Okay, so this is where our theme starts. So 1 minute and 7 seconds. If you want to write down the times on your Cornell notes. So let me go ahead and bring my Cornell notes back over. So A was, we're drawing. A was 1 minute and 7 seconds in the video. This way you can find it. So now we're going to look. Before we did A and B and C, but since these are going to be variations, we're going to call this next section A1. Sorry about my 1, not so great. A1. All right, so I went off screen so we don't have to waste time with me writing on our Cornell notes. So as we listen to A1, the first variation, let's listen for 16th notes in the violin and the woodwinds. This 16th note rhythm change is the main part of this variation. So here's the kind of rhythms that we'll be looking at, but mostly I want you to listen for them. You'll definitely notice it. At 1 minute 20 seconds, Haydn plays another prank on the sleepy wind players. So let's think about contrast between the sweet, light melody in the upper strings versus the rude, almost savage hits. And take a look at those lazy wind players and see what happens here. What? What happened? I wasn't sleeping again. I wish he'd quit doing that. Second half of the theme. Notice the hook bowing on the 16th notes. Okay, so I'm going to pause it here and go off camera to write our notes. And we're back. Okay, so let's take a look at our next variation. So we have A2. So we go up here, we have A, A1, and now A2. So A2 is going to run about 2 minutes, 6 seconds to 3 minutes. So we can see we've got a pattern that each variation is taking us roughly a minute. So in the second variation, I see this variation as stormy or dramatic. So Haydn moves us to C minor. And how does he do that? He takes our E natural, our first finger on the first tape on the D string, and he turns it into an E flat, which is a low 1 on the D string. So what I mean by that, in our shoulder instruments with a nice tall wrist, and we get our touch 1 and our touch 2 on the neck of the instrument, and then we slide that knuckle back towards the nut. That sliding that knuckle, as long as our wrist is tall, we can kind of tuck our elbow in, and that allows us to drop first finger lower or halfway between the first tape and the nut of the instrument. For basses, of course, we don't have all of this because we're in the other position. Okay, so we have C minor, which is a sadder sound. I want you to think about contrast. So is this variation going to be louder? Is it going to be softer? What we're looking at is the contrast. So to me, it suggests a thunderstorm. So the contrast is like, boom, we have a big thunderclap, and then suddenly it's quiet, and all we hear is a little bit of rain, and then boom, lightning and a big thunderclap, and then it gets quiet, and we hear the rain again. The other thing we want to notice in this variation is that Haydn does not give us an orchestral hit to transition into the next variation. So I want you to pay attention to that transition. Without the orchestral hit, is this suggesting how at the end of a big storm, all of a sudden it gets weirdly quiet? So the moral of this variation is think contrast. And here we go. See the more aggressive bowing too. Lightning and thunder. Okay. We're going to go ahead and go off camera so I can get our Cornell notes. I'll be right back. And we're back. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at A3, our third variation. So up here in our form, A1, A2, now we have A3. So let's go back down here. So we're about 3 minutes to 4 minutes and 7 seconds-ish. In this variation, does it become more gentle after remember the stormy and dramatic second variation? Does it now become more gentle? Does this suggest the quiet after a big thunderstorm? Here in Texas, we know all about thunderstorms. I like to sit on my porch and watch them. So think contrast. between A2 and A3. So I want you to think about the contrast between entire variations as opposed to contrasts that happen inside a variation. This variation is all about the texture. So what Haydn does in this section is he moves the melody away from the violins. He's given the first violins a break from melody, and your melodic texture becomes a focus or a feature of solo and duets in the woodwind players. So specifically the flutes and the oboe. So without further ado, let's give this part a listen. Here's your oboe. Flautus. Okay, so 407. So I'm going to take us off camera again while I fill out our Cornell notes. So I'll be right back. And we're back. Okay, let's talk about the fourth variation. So roughly 407 to 453 in the YouTube video. So in our form, we have A1, A2, A3, and now A4. Again, keeping those little numbers designating our variations in the superscript, as we call it. So in the fourth variation, this is a very lively and energetic restatement of the theme. The melody goes back to the violins. Things that we want to pay attention to. Haydn is using rhythm to create this variation. So in the first phrase, we're going to listen for triplets. So triplet means 3 notes per beat or 3 notes per pulse. These triplets occur in a step, so one note after the other, line, space, or a linear melody. They also appear as skips, so that means there's more than one line or space in between notes. We call, and specifically what we have is arpeggiation or arpeggios. We haven't done this in class, but arpeggios is a fancy way of saying notes that are skips in a specific pattern within the scale. In the second phrase of the variation, we're looking at dotted rhythms. So this is what they look like. I'm not going to try to explain or teach it here for the purpose of the video. I just want you to listen to it and kind of look at these notations and see if that makes sense to you. So away we go, and let's listen. Triplets and violins. Now the dotted rhythms. Da dum, da dum, da dum. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to go ahead and take us off screen, and I'm going to do our Cornell notes for the next and last section. And we're back. Okay. So this last section, we're going to call it a coda. You could call it A5. So this is a poorly rendered coda symbol. A coda is something that you will see in your music. We haven't played anything with a coda yet. So just kind of take that word and put it in the back of your head, kind of in the parking lot for later on when we learn about these. All right, I'm going to fix that because that's terrible. Okay, so A5. So in your notes, you can call it a coda or you can call it A5 or you can do it just like I've done. It's up to you. So in this last section, it's signaled by some very fast triplets in the violin. The music gets very big and then it calms down. So you have a lot of contrast. He's kind of looking backwards towards some of the dynamic contrasts. He also looks backwards towards, remember back in A2, where he used minor chords with the low 2, the E flat. Well, here he's going to add the rhythm changes, but he's also going to add chord changes. But instead of using minor, he uses sounds that we call seventh chords. So there's a lot of energy in this last bit, and he prepares us for a very nice, calm ending. So he's setting us up for the end. But is it really going to end? Let's find out. So can you feel the ending coming? It really feels like we're just going to nicely relax. Ah, nice and relaxed. Okay, so we can see now that Haydn did indeed have a surprise. This is why, my friends, they call it the Surprise Symphony. So we've had this very energetic and exciting bit of music. It's been summing up everything we've listened to all throughout the variations. So we've combined all of these musical arguments into the coda section. So we're wrapping the story up, if you will. And composers would often do this sort of thing, and then they'll give you either a really big bang at the end or they'll give you a nice soft end. And the idea is that you get a moment to pause and kind of reflect on what you've heard. And then the music stops, and you know this is time to applause. So, what happened here is Haydn tricked his audience into clapping. So they start to applause, no idea what's coming next. And in his day, it probably wasn't a balloon. It was probably the timpani player with a big log or a 2x4 and took that thing and made a loud, terrible, rude sound. And so that was the surprise. Joke's on you. This audience clearly knew what was going to happen, so they weren't tricked. But back when this music was originally performed, people would be tricked. And that was one of the reasons people like to go listen to Haydn's music. So, pop, surprise, and I pose to you once again our question, and this is entirely your opinion: was Haydn a musical troll? So, guys, thanks for joining me this week. I hope you've enjoyed this performance and kind of picking it apart so that we understand it better. And remember, go out and do great things. You are unique because it takes all of us and all of our uniqueness to create our team, to create our orchestra, and indeed to create our world and our society. You matter, guys. I'll see you next time.